The officer leans in toward your window, pauses, and says four words that instantly change the entire mood of the stop. I smell alcohol. Even if you've had nothing to drink, even if it's been hours since your last glass of wine with dinner, something about hearing that phrase makes people's stomachs drop and their words start tumbling out too fast. Here's what almost nobody understands in that exact moment. The smell of alcohol, on its own, is one of the weakest, least specific pieces of evidence in the entire DUI investigation process, and officers know this, which is exactly why what they do with that statement matters so much more than the statement itself. I smell alcohol is often less a conclusion than it is an opening move, a way to justify the next several steps of the investigation, and how you respond to it can shape everything that follows. I'm going to walk through what that statement actually does and doesn't establish legally, why the smell of alcohol is more complicated as evidence than most people realize, and exactly what to say so you don't accidentally hand the officer everything he needs simply because you panicked at the sound of four words. Before I get into it, subscribe now, because this is genuinely one of the most common openers in any DUI-adjacent stop, and almost nobody knows how to respond to it correctly in the moment it actually happens. What "I smell alcohol" actually means as evidence. Let's start with the legal reality, because it's more limited than the phrase makes it sound. Under the general framework for probable cause, established most clearly in Illinois v. Gates, 1983, courts look at the totality of the circumstances, meaning the whole picture of facts available to the officer, not any single fact in isolation. The odor of alcohol is one fact that can contribute to that picture. On its own, without anything else supporting it, it's rarely treated by courts as enough to establish probable cause for an arrest. It's more commonly understood as a factor that can support reasonable suspicion to investigate further, the standard from Terry v. Ohio, 1968, which is a considerably lower bar than probable cause. This distinction matters enormously in practice. Reasonable suspicion lets an officer extend the stop briefly to investigate, ask more questions, request field sobriety tests, look for additional indicators. Probable cause, the higher standard, is what's actually required to arrest you. The smell of alcohol alone typically gets an officer to the first category, not automatically to the second. What happens between those 2 points, in the minutes right after "I smell alcohol" gets said out loud, is often where the rest of the evidence supporting an actual arrest gets built, and a meaningful amount of that additional evidence tends to come directly from what you say and do next. Why the smell of alcohol is weaker evidence than it sounds. Here's something worth understanding that almost never gets explained clearly. Pure alcohol itself is essentially odorless. What people actually smell isn't the alcohol content in your blood, it's the congeners and flavoring compounds in whatever specific beverage was consumed. The hops in beer, the tannins in wine, the sugars in a mixed drink. This means the smell an officer detects tells them almost nothing reliable about how much alcohol is actually in your system or when you consumed it. Someone who had one beer 3 hours ago and someone who's genuinely impaired after several drinks can both produce a detectable odor, and the smell alone doesn't meaningfully distinguish between them. There are also entirely innocent explanations for a detectable odor that have nothing to do with impaired driving at all. A spilled drink on clothing earlier in the evening. Being near someone else who was drinking, with the smell transferring onto your clothes or hair. Certain foods and dishes prepared with wine or liquor. Some mouthwashes and hand sanitizers contain alcohol and can produce a similar smell. There's even a genuine medical condition worth knowing about. Certain metabolic states, including diabetic ketoacidosis, can produce a sweet, fruity breath odor that has been mistaken for alcohol by people without medical training, including, on occasion, officers relying on smell alone. None of this means an officer is lying or acting in bad faith when they say they smell alcohol. In most cases, they genuinely do smell something. What it means is that the smell itself is a starting point for an investigation, not proof of impairment, and understanding that distinction changes how you should think about everything that happens after those words are spoken. This is exactly why, in practice, prosecutors rarely build a DUI case around odor alone, and defense attorneys who handle these cases regularly know it's one of the easier pieces of evidence to contextualize later. A report that says, "odor of alcohol detected," carries very different weight than a report that adds, driver stated he had consumed 4 drinks within the last hour. Because the second version came directly from the driver, in their own words, and is far harder to walk back or explain away than a subjective sensory impression from the officer. The gap between those two versions of a report is, in a very real sense, the entire subject of this video. The mistake people make right after hearing it. The overwhelming majority of people, the instant they hear, "I smell alcohol," respond by immediately trying to explain or minimize. "I only had 1 beer. That was hours ago. I'm not even buzzed." Every one of these responses feels protective in the moment, and every one of them actually does the opposite. You've just confirmed alcohol consumption, provided a quantity, and provided a timeline, all voluntarily, all without being asked a single direct question. That confirmation, quantity, and timeline become exactly the kind of additional detail that moves an investigation from reasonable suspicion towards something stronger, and it came entirely from you, not from anything the officer independently observed. This is the single most important thing to understand about this specific moment. The statement, "I smell alcohol," is not a question. You are not required to respond to it with information at all. Officers will often pause after saying it, sometimes deliberately, creating a silence that feels like it needs to be filled. That silence is not actually a request for information, even though it feels exactly like one. It's worth naming this tactic directly, because once you recognize it, it becomes much easier to sit with the discomfort of not filling it. A pause after a loaded statement is a well-known conversational pressure technique, used far beyond traffic stops, precisely because most people find silence in a tense moment genuinely uncomfortable and instinctively rush to end it, usually by talking. The person who stays quiet, or who responds with something short and neutral instead of an explanation, is doing something that goes against a very natural social instinct. Knowing that the discomfort itself is the mechanism doing the work, not some special skill the officer has, makes it considerably easier to just let the silence sit there without rushing to fill it with details you didn't need to provide. What to actually say? The calm, complete response to, "I smell alcohol," doesn't need to confirm or deny anything about your drinking specifically. Something like, "I understand. Is there something specific you need from me right now?" Redirects the moment back to the officer without volunteering any of the details that would otherwise strengthen the investigation. If the officer follows up directly, "Have you been drinking tonight?" you're not required to answer, and a calm, complete response is, "I'd rather not answer questions about that tonight." Said flatly, without nervousness or defensiveness. This doesn't confirm anything, doesn't deny anything, and doesn't hand over a timeline or a quantity that could later be checked against your behavior or challenged as inconsistent. If the officer moves toward requesting a preliminary breath test, the small handheld device often used roadside, it's worth knowing that in most states this specific test is voluntary, separate from the formal evidentiary test administered later at the station. You can say, "I respectfully decline the preliminary test. I'll comply with whatever testing is legally required if I'm arrested." This draws a clear, calm line between declining a voluntary screening step and refusing to cooperate with the process altogether, which is a meaningfully different message than simply refusing everything outright. If field sobriety tests are requested, these two are generally voluntary in most states, and you can decline them the same way. "I don't wish to perform any tests." You don't need to explain the decision or justify it. A complete sentence, said once, calmly, is the entire response required. It's worth understanding what's actually happening on the officer's side during this exchange, because it explains why the specific wording of your response matters. Every question and every request during this stretch of the stop is designed to add a documented data point to the report, a confirmed drinking timeline, a performance score on a balance test, a numeric reading from a handheld device. Each one you decline to provide, calmly and without incident, is simply one fewer data point in that eventual report. None of this makes you look guilty on its own, despite how it might feel in the moment. Plenty of sober, cautious people decline these same requests simply because they understand how the process works, and officers who handle DUI stops regularly are generally familiar with encountering exactly this kind of measured, informed response. Why your tone matters as much as your words. Everything said during this part of the stop typically gets captured on body camera audio and documented in the officer's report, including tone and demeanor, not just the literal words used. A calm, measured refusal to discuss the specifics of your evening reads very differently to both the officer in the moment and potentially to a jury later than an anxious, over-explained one or an angry, defensive one. Anxiety can look like guilt even when it's actually just anxiety. Anger can look like consciousness of wrongdoing even when it's actually just frustration at being questioned. Neither reaction is fair, exactly, but both are realistic outcomes of how these interactions tend to be perceived, which is precisely why staying calm and using short, consistent, unremarkable language matters as much as the substance of what you're declining to say. This is worth practicing out loud before you ever need it, the same way you'd rehearse anything else you want to come out smoothly under pressure. The gap between a calm, complete sentence and a nervous, half-finished one is enormous in how it reads on camera, even when the underlying legal content is identical. "I'd rather not discuss that tonight," said once. Clearly, lands completely differently than the same idea delivered in fragments, even though both are technically declining to answer. Rehearsing the clean version in advance is what makes it more likely to be the version that actually comes out when you're genuinely nervous on the side of a dark road. When the smell isn't even coming from you. There's a scenario worth addressing directly, because it comes up more often than people expect. Sometimes the smell an officer detects is coming from a passenger, spilled alcohol in the vehicle, or something in the trunk, rather than from the driver at all. Officers approaching a car at night, working primarily off smell and general impressions, don't always have an easy way to immediately isolate the source, and "I smell alcohol" is sometimes directed at the vehicle generally rather than specifically at you. If this applies to your situation, it's reasonable to say so calmly, without over-explaining. "That may be coming from elsewhere in the car, but I'm not going to get into details about anyone else." You're not obligated to identify or implicate a passenger, and you're also not obligated to accept a premise that isn't accurate simply because correcting it feels awkward. The goal isn't to argue forensics roadside. It's simply to avoid quietly accepting, through silence, an assumption that may not actually apply to you. A realistic walkthrough. Here's roughly how this tends to unfold in practice. The officer leans toward the window and says, "I smell alcohol coming from the vehicle." You respond, calmly, "Okay. Is there something specific you need from me?" The officer follows with, "Have you had anything to drink tonight?" You respond, "I'd rather not get into that." If the officer pushes further, "Well, if you haven't been drinking, it shouldn't be a problem to just tell me." You can repeat, calmly, "I understand, but I'm just not going to discuss that tonight." None of this needs to sound hostile. Said in a flat, unhurried tone, it reads as someone who's simply declining a conversation, not someone hiding something specific. If the conversation shifts toward a request for field sobriety tests or the handheld roadside device, the same calm pattern continues. "I don't wish to perform any tests," repeated as needed if the request comes again in slightly different phrasing. Consistency across the entire interaction matters more than any single sentence in isolation. A driver who declines calmly and consistently throughout creates a very different record than one who wavers, changes their answer, or eventually caves after enough pressure. What happens if you're arrested anyway? Declining to discuss your drinking and declining voluntary roadside tests doesn't guarantee you won't be arrested if the officer believes other observations, speech, behavior, driving pattern before the stop, are enough on their own to establish probable cause. Nothing covered in this video eliminates that possibility. What it does is avoid adding your own voluntary statements to whatever the officer already has, which matters considerably if the case is ever reviewed and challenged later, since courts frequently distinguish between what an officer personally observed and what a driver volunteered under the pressure of the moment. If you are arrested, the same principles from other stops apply. Comply physically with instructions and invoke your rights clearly. "I'm invoking my right to remain silent, and I'd like to speak with an attorney," is a complete statement that should bring further questioning to a stop. What happens after an arrest, including the formal evidentiary test and the separate administrative process tied to refusing it, involves its own distinct legal framework that varies meaningfully by state, and it's worth treating that as its own separate conversation with an actual attorney rather than something to work out roadside. It's worth being honest that declining to talk doesn't make an arrest disappear as a possibility. and treating this video as a guaranteed way to avoid arrest would be misleading. What it does is change what evidence exists to support that arrest and whatever follows it. A case built primarily on an officer's subjective description of a smell, combined with general observations, is genuinely a different case, legally, than one that also includes a driver's own admitted timeline and quantity. Defense attorneys handle these two versions very differently, and the difference between them often traces directly back to what was or wasn't said in the first 90 seconds after "I smell alcohol" was spoken out loud. The short version, "I smell alcohol," is a statement, not proof, and on its own it typically establishes reasonable suspicion to investigate further, not probable cause to arrest. The smell itself is genuinely weak, nonspecific evidence. It doesn't reliably indicate quantity, timing, or impairment, and it has a surprising number of innocent explanations. The biggest mistake people make is responding to that statement by voluntarily supplying the quantity, timeline, and confirmation the officer doesn't yet have on their own. The fix is simple. You're not required to answer questions about your drinking. You're not required to perform voluntary roadside tests. And how calmly you decline matters just as much as the fact that you're declining at all. Everything in this video rests on one simple habit worth carrying forward. Treat a statement as a statement, not a question that demands your answer. Officers are trained to make observations sound like they require a response. They rarely legally do. The pause after "I smell alcohol" belongs to the officer, not to you, and you're allowed to let it sit there unanswered or answer it with nothing more than a calm acknowledgement that doesn't hand over a single new fact. If this changed how you'll respond the next time you hear those 4 words, that's exactly why I put these together. Subscribe now, so this response is already familiar and automatic before you're the one actually hearing it. Hit like so more people understand how weak this specific piece of evidence really is on its own. And drop a comment if you want me to cover exactly what happens procedurally once field sobriety tests actually begin, step by step. This is general legal education, not legal advice for your specific situation. How courts weigh odor of alcohol as part of probable cause, and the specific rules around voluntary roadside testing vary somewhat by state and depend heavily on the full set of facts involved in any particular stop. If you're dealing with an actual DUI stop or charge, the right step is speaking with a licensed attorney in your state who can evaluate the specific facts of your case, not general guidance from a video. Know that a smell alone is not a reliable, scientific fact about your actual blood alcohol level. Know you're not required to fill the silence after it's mentioned. Stay calm, say less, and let the officer's actual independent evidence, not your own voluntary words, be whatever it's actually going to be.